Okay, everyone, I hope this is working. I am trying to do my first patron Q A for my patrons over at Patreon. So thank you to those of you who are patrons. I'm sitting here setting up the video and everything. I have tried doing, I watched a tutorial on Zoom trying to figure out how to stream this video live over to YouTube, and I have not figured that out yet. So I'm here on Zoom. I'm hoping some people are going to join me. I just sent out some invitations through Patreon and then also through Facebook. So I'm going to go over there and see if people are actually reading the notifications that I've given. Let me put one out through Twitter as well. I'm recording this, so what I'll do is I'll post it on YouTube later. That's the intention. Let's see what we got over on Twitter. Right. Okay, that's something different. Let me do this. Okay. I'm going to say streaming to YouTube, not accessible to me right now. Not sure why. Here's my Zoom meeting. And I'm giving you guys links, hoping you'll come and join me over here. So far, I'm looking at my Zoom software and I see only me hanging out. And I'm wondering, should I just go ahead and answer the questions, or should I wait until some people get in here? Maybe I should wait. Anyway, you're seeing it's later in the day. This is later than I'm usually on. I'm going to be on tomorrow with Huron, but that's going to be early in the morning. So we'll see what quality of light. I'm getting light in through a window. That's it's low tech, but it's been working pretty nicely for me so far. I don't see anybody. I don't know if anybody is here. Let me look at my settings. Yeah, it just says manage participants 1. If you guys join, I don't know what I learn. Let me see more. Allow attendees to chat with everybody. Yeah, so if you guys came in, if you were a participant, then, yeah, and I did that. I gave a URL. I'm hoping people will join me here. I don't know what happened. Oh, there's 2 participants, and the other person is joining in as a video. But what I want is, oh, so hello. I don't know who you are because your screen's not showing, and you don't want your screen to be showing. So let me get the settings so that, okay, you're muted. More. Stop video. Okay. And we're going to stop video for all of you guys who are coming in here. Yeah, it wants to have video for you guys as well. Anyway, this is great. So I've got a couple people joining me. I can go ahead, I assume, and officially start this if I've got a couple people. Good evening. Yay, excellent. And you guys can, I guess, chat to me personally through this meeting software, and you can also chat to each other and look at the chat if you're here participating. So welcome, John, and welcome, T-Moon, whoever you are. So I'm supposed to be answering patron questions from the patrons who've supported me over at Patreon. Last month, I had the tiers, the reward tiers set up a certain way, and I've actually switched them since. But what you're getting from me today are answers to questions submitted by patrons on the old schedule. So I had the patrons who were at the qualifying tier to submit questions, give me questions, and I'm going to go ahead and read those to you and do my best to answer them. And people who are here, who come in live and who want to also put some questions here in the chat, you can do so. If I can get to them, then I will. I'm asking that this priority be given to patrons. So if you're a patron, make sure you verify that. What I'm going to end up having to do in the future is set up a post like this so that maybe the patrons are invited to join me here in the Zoom software, as well as I'm going to figure out how to do the streaming to YouTube. I'm going to figure out how to do that, but I couldn't get it. There's supposed to be a menu that says more and that gives you an option to go ahead and stream to YouTube. And it doesn't, it's got the chat. Okay, here's the more for the participants. And it says nothing. It's supposed to let me go ahead and stream. I watched a tutorial. Anyway, here I am. I'm going to go ahead and answer your patron questions. So the first question that I got, and I'm not going to say who it was because I'm not sure that the people want to be named. If you want to claim the question later publicly, you can go ahead and do it. Here's the first question. He says, okay, so since you've asked, a question that comes to mind is this. He says, since you've mentioned online a couple personal bests in exercise and posted photographs which make it clear you're in strikingly good shape. I did not pay him to say this, I promise. He's paying me to say this. So thank you. He says, I'm curious, what is your workout regimen and how much do you credit dietary choices versus exercise? And he qualifies it. He says, not the most philosophic question, but since some objectivists and people in general don't give enough priority to health, it's a topic worth addressing periodically. Okay, so first of all, I do believe that anything about just sort of general body type and weight and stuff, it's going to be achieved mostly through diet. I think that most people would agree with that. You don't want to spend all day in the gym working off whatever it is that you ate and all those types of things. So for me, it is mostly through diet. Diet is a really easy thing for me. I mean, people have different temperaments in this regard. So for me, I'm the kind of person, it's like I have to remind myself to eat. Some people hate, they're going to say, I hate you. But, you know, I don't get on a scale very often. In fact, I got on the scale recently because I did get another personal best in my weightlifting. I do strength training a day a week, and I just hit 372 pounds on the leg press, which is pretty cool. And so then I'm wondering, okay, well, how close am I getting to leg pressing 3 times my body weight, which is something that's worth shooting for. So I was like, okay, well, what is my body weight? Let me go get on a scale. I don't really keep track of it. It's like I keep track of it through the size of my clothes, how my clothes are fitting more than anything else. So, you know, for me, it's like making time to eat. But what I do, and I think a lot of people who have an easy time controlling their weight do, is control the type of things that you eat. Like you say, I'm not just going to eat pure junk. If I'm going to eat pure junk, which is just, you know, straight sugar and carbs, you're going to eat very limited quantities of it only every so often, right? So you're not going to, you know, go pig out on a bag of potato chips or, you know, like a bunch of cake or whatever. So, you know, given that I don't do that, then other than that, it is doing what pretty much all of the paleo and keto type gurus, and also Jordan Peterson in his book recommends the sort of thing that I do, which is start out the day with fat and proteins, in effect, only fat and proteins, and then phase in carbs as the days go on. I'm not religious about this in any way. So for example, I went on vacation in Copenhagen and there was this great bakery and they had just these beautiful pastries. And yeah, I had them for breakfast a couple days. So, you know, I've never been the type in my life to be religious about any diet. And I've been very fortunate in that I have a metabolism where, you know, whatever it is that I felt like I wanted to eat, I've always been sort of within the same 10-pound range. An exception at the top is I was on crew in college for a year, you know, the rowing team. I was on the novice, the lightweight rowing team, because I'm only 5'7", okay? So imagine at 5'7", 5'7", I was at one point on crew, just kind of at my fittest, most muscular. I was 140 pounds of just like solid packed muscle. So that's like an upper range. When I stopped crew, and then I was also just stupidly on a vegetarian diet after I stopped crew. This is really dumb. I actually went up to about 148. God, I haven't talked about that before. Something like that. That was like the highest that I've been, and that was bad. And then when I went back on a more sensible diet with protein and things like that, so I've been very fortunate. Unless something weird happens, out of the ordinary, I've had no trouble. I always stay between 125, 135, somewhere in there. When I was really sick once, after a surgery, not sick, but just really weak after a surgery, I was down to 119 or something. And that was only a few years ago. So now I'm building back up again. And like I said, getting a lot stronger, but it's all about really, I think, food, and the biggest things you can do are, shift your carb consumption to later in the day. Carbs are, I think, good to eat, and some people tolerate carbs better than others. If you're trying to lose a lot of weight, I guess you don't have that many carbs. For someone like me, where I'm just in maintenance mode, and in fact, sometimes I know I need to pack on a little bit more, then I will increase the carbs, but I usually have them later in the day. So that's diet-wise. By the way, I hope it goes without saying, this is just me. This is what I do. I have spent some time reading and researching diets, not a whole ton. I am not giving anybody diet advice. You should go to doctors for diet advice. All the disclaimers that, this is just me. This is what I do. And of course, I think I've been very fortunate genetically. So all the things that when I ever complain about my parents, let's balance it out with genetically. I'm fortunate. It's easy for me to, pretty much maintain my weight. And it's a lot easier if you go with something that's sort of ketogenic and stay away from sugar as much as possible. And the carbs that you eat, you try to eat higher quality carbs later in the day. Lots of fat. I've just had lots of butter and bacon and all that stuff. So that's diet. Now, exercise. Exercise, I have been an athlete basically most of my life. So I have this identity as an athlete, someone who's fit and strong, and I always try to keep that up. There's been times, of course, that I've been kind of lazier. And like I said, after I quit crew, I went through this bad period for a few months or something. I was just not doing well. But anyway, so what have I done? So when I was in junior high, I was on track and I ran a very brutal event, which was the 800 meter. So you have to have quite a bit of endurance to do the 800 meter. It's not as much as the 1600, but it's kind of like in that middle zone where it's not quite a sprint and not quite long. It was a little bit of a tricky race. So I did that in junior high. In high school, I'm going to go ahead and have to turn off Roger's video for him too. No, okay, he doesn't have any. Oh, that's something different. Okay, Roger, we're going to stop your video. Welcome, Roger. I first was talking about diet. You'll have to go back, and I guess I'll post this recording on YouTube after, so anybody who comes in is going to be able to see it later. So welcome, Roger. Anyway, so I told you about diet. Now with exercise, like I said, junior high, ran track. High school, I was on basketball. Then when I went into college, I'm hearing a mic. I'm going to go ahead and mute Roger. I could go ahead and unmute you. If you guys at a certain point think that you want to ask a question, I can go ahead and unmute you and let you guys ask a question at the end of this. So if you want to do that, we can do that as well. Okay. Yeah. So exercise. So high school, I played basketball for a while. That was when I lived in Texas. But then I moved to California and I was pretty much kind of lazy. I mean, I walked a lot, but I was not really fit. And then when I went to college, I was, I've always been sort of a runner. So I did run sort of throughout all of these things. I remember I went and did a 5K in Texas once in the middle of the summer and pushed myself so hard that I basically got sick afterwards. It was not a pretty thing. So I'm, kind of competitive. I really push myself when I'm athletic as well. And of course that can get dangerous. And when I talk about something in a second, I'll give you the scenario there, but I hurt my back. So, yeah, so I've, ran throughout, and I think probably in California, when I moved to California from Texas in the middle of or kind of end of my sophomore year, not the best time to move. I wasn't able to get on any athletic team. I probably really didn't try. And I wasn't so athletic then for a while, but I walked a lot, and, I was in decent shape and everything. And you're a kid, when you're a kid, everything is almost given to you for free. So I really wasn't athletic again until I went to college. And when I went into college, it was funny because I was ambivalent about, was I going to go to college or was I going to join the military? And I mean, it was a very strange time in my life with family and stuff. So I put in a college application. I was going to community college, and I put in an application for a university to only UCLA. It was the only university that I applied to. And I said, okay, well, if I don't get in UCLA, I'm going to join the military. So I got into UCLA, thank you, and went there. And I decided, okay, well, I'd like some discipline, some physical discipline in particular. And I had a friend who was on crew on the men's crew team. And I decided, okay, maybe I'll just go out and try out for women's crew. And you had to run, at a certain speed around the track for some length. I can't remember. You had maybe a certain time of a mile or something. You had to do a minimal amount to qualify for the novice crew team. And that's what I did. I went out for crew and I qualified, and I went ahead and did that for a year. That started hurting my back, no doubt. And then later, after I went off crew, I really wasn't so athletic for a while. I did a lot of running still. And then I was also playing some tennis. So some of you guys know that I was married to Leonard Peikoff for some years, and he got me into tennis. So first I was playing with him, then I was taking lessons, and then I was doing sort of the competitive local competitions with other clubs and stuff. So it was just club level competition. It never got very serious or anything. So I did some competitive tennis there. And, I remember, again, putting myself a lot into that, really trying to master the sport. It was a lot of fun. And of course, it was fun also to play with my husband at the time. So that was a good thing too, tennis. And then, so this is crazy, right? After 9/11, I don't know, I just got more into kind of withdrawing from the world, and I was really active, right? So I was doing tennis and stuff, but it wasn't like any sort of a primary focus for me. And I was very active, for instance, in trying to keep Elian Gonzalez here and writing op-eds and doing a lot of intellectual things. And then after 9/11, and particularly digesting what happened in 9/11, 2001 there with Leonard Peikoff, I swear I got sort of kind of a PTSD and withdrew from the world a little. And around the same time, I got a second dog. And the second dog that I got happened to be, and I only got her because I thought she was really cute, but I got a Pyrenean Shepherd. And Pyrenean Shepherds are these little herding dogs, and they are just super fast and super athletic. So this dog that I got, not only adorable, you can find maybe some videos of me and her online, but I'm going to answer a question that I just saw in the chat in a second. So, these dogs are adorable. They're athletic. This one that I got was only 14 pounds, kind of at her athletic weight, 14 pounds, but all leg and just great jumper, great athlete. So the breeder who ended up actually giving me this dog, because this dog had a slight heart murmur when she was born. So I just got so lucky with this dog. So she gives me this dog and she says, by the way, did you know that these dogs are good at a sport called dog agility? I said, okay, dog agility. What's that? She gives me a little kind of thing and says, maybe you can go, introduction. She gives me some information, and I go out and I start taking a class. And I get all involved in this sport. So if you can imagine, you've got this sport. Let me just explain to you dog agility if you don't know it. So dog agility is a sport where you run alongside a dog. You guide a dog over an obstacle course. And the particular obstacle course that you're running with the dog on that competition day is a course that the dog has never run on before. The dog has never run on that particular combination of obstacles in that particular order, length of course, everything else. What you get as the competitor, as the handler of the dog, is you get about 10 minutes to walk around the course and plan how you're going to guide the dog. But when it comes down to the run, the dog is, doing this course for the first time. And the way I used to think about it sometimes is like I'm the tour guide, and I'm trying to give the dog this very smooth path, over all of these obstacles. And I did the best that I could. I was also teaching and other things too, but I was really involved in this sport. And in a way, I sort of felt a bit obligated to do it because the breeder gave me this dog. And this dog, it turns out, was the litter mate of the international gold medalist champion in this sport. Okay, litter mate of top dog in this sport. Just crazy. And so, you feel like, okay, go out and try to make the best of this dog. I remember I lived in Texas for a while during this period when I was trying to get competitive in agility and go out there and actually be able to compete. And the guy says, I forget what he called me, right? But it's, it's like, you have no idea how to drive a car and you have this Ferrari, and you're going. So in any event, I'm trying to handle this Ferrari, this dog, this great dog, and her name was Boo. And I still have her actually, but she's 15 now and she's not anywhere close to running shape. Anyway, so I ran with her and we got pretty good for a while. I forget the way that I put it. It's like, we're pretty good dabblers. We're pretty good dabblers in the sport. We went to some national competitions. I never placed at any of the national competitions. I went to an international competition, and oddly enough, we finished in the top 10% at this one international competition that I went to in Germany. But for me, and I've talked about this, I'm sorry, I'm going to bore some people. For me, the highlight of our agility career was I got to run with her as do a demonstration run at the World Team Tryouts. So the United States World Team Tryouts in 2008, we got to go and we ran demo. And there was one run that we did. It was a jumpers run. And jumpers, all you have in a jumpers run are the jumps, the tunnels, and the weave poles. So it's a very simple in terms of skill, and you could just go out there and be fast and stuff. And we used to do really well in those. Locally, we would get first place in those often. Quite often we'd get first place locally in the Los Angeles area at competitions in our height class. Very short little dog. So we go to this World Team Tryouts. And we ran this run that if we had been actually trying out with all of these top agility handlers in the place, we would have gotten 5th place in this competition. And to me, that was just so exciting. It was really, really awesome. I'm trying to see what I can do with my video. My video is distracting me a little bit. Sorry. Yeah. So I was really competitive and I really enjoyed that sport. You have the relationship with the dog, you have the challenge of memorizing the course and planning how you're going to run around it and the physical coordination and all that. And you had to be fast and in decent shape too. So I would keep myself in shape. Otherwise, you wouldn't just go out there and run agility. I would do some strength training and some other things too. So that's what I did for many years. And then I kind of fell out of shape for a bit. And as I said, I had this surgery a while ago. So what do I do now? I give you all that long story. It's like I've been an athlete off and on my whole life. It's been part of my identity. So what do I do now? Because right now I can't have primarily an athletic focus. My focus is trying to provide value in shows like this and hopefully also add a writing component into this as well. That's one of my goals over at Patreon that I'm going to get up to when we get up to a certain number of patrons. I'm going to have patron goals and patron rewards that are corresponding to writing as well. Those things are my focus now. So what do you do? What do you do to try to keep in shape? First of all, I do go out and walk every day. I just walk. It's not, I don't believe, for example, in doing long distance running. Let me answer this one question that I got in the chat now. T Moon asks, did you ever have any runner's high experience? I never have running 5K or 10K. The longest distance that I have ever run is about 8 to 10 miles. 8 to 10 miles is the longest that I've ever run. And maybe I did get somewhat of a runner's high. I remember really enjoying running sometimes, but that's the longest. I've never had a goal, for example, to run a marathon. And it would be an accomplishment, right? You'd say, okay, but I feel like it would beat up my body so much. And I've been told it's just so hard on the knees and everything else that it's just not ever been a goal of mine. I'm happy with, having run the 8 to 10 miles. I've done it a few times. I did it as part of the training for crew. That's when we had to do it. I don't think I've ever run anything that long if it wasn't required of me. What I have done is I've done some long bike rides. And I did a bike ride once. It was in Alaska. So after I'm an attorney, and I took the bar exam back in 98. And right after that experience was over, I took the bar exam, and then I went on this biking trip in Alaska. And it's one of these companies, they handle the whole thing. They plan out the route, and they schlep all your stuff from place to place, and they set you up at the little cute hotels and stuff. And you just get on a bike and you ride each day with a group. And it's so much fun. And there was this one day, like the very last day, they also ramp up the distance. So it's not like you have to be a great cyclist in order to survive this, but they do, I don't know, like 20 miles or 30 miles the first day, and a little bit more. I remember we did 50 some odd miles one day. And then on the last day, and you take a day off in between sometimes and rest and do other, like we did rafting, river rafting. So on the last day, it's 112 miles. So I actually did a 112-mile bike ride once, but only because it was part of this trip. It's not like, I did it as some sort of a regular thing. I'm mostly not a long distance endurance person. I don't have a goal to do a marathon or anything like that. And now I don't run. And the reason I don't run is at a certain point, I hurt my back really bad. So, again, I tell you, I self-identify as an athlete. I'll give you one more story. I taught at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. And as part of the orientation for that, the faculty and everybody, they get to go on the basic training obstacle course, not necessarily go on the whole thing, but you get a tour. So they walk you through and they show you some of the basic training obstacle course that all the cadets go through. And they tell you for certain obstacles, well, if you want, you can try it. You can go ahead. So they have this one, and I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's, it's like climb and pull yourself up this rope and climb, So I'm tough, I'm an athlete. I have to go do this. So I go and I do this and I climb and everything. And I thought I was feeling okay. And of course, I had moved recently to Colorado Springs. And so in addition to doing that basic training obstacle course, climbing and everything, I am moving boxes. I'm carrying a bunch of empty boxes out to the curb, unpacking all this stuff. And then finally, I had a colleague at the Air Force Academy who was really, in great shape and everything. And she says, hey, go on this hike. There's a hike in Colorado Springs you can do. It's called Manitou Incline. Those of you who have ever been there, you'll know. And it's a really steep grade. So you go, I think it's only a mile or something, but it's this really steep grade that you go up in that mile. So I did that and the moving and the basic training ups all within a short period of time. Woke up one morning, and this is fall of 2005, I think. Yeah. And just the worst pain ever. And it was this herniated disc. I mean, it was horrible, like, it's going to make you nauseous type pain. So I ended up having to have surgery. I don't have any fusions or any weird thing, but they just had to, take out the herniated stuff so it wasn't pinching on my nerve anymore, seal me back up. My entire agility career was after that time period. So you can imagine I've been a really good athlete since then. As I said, I went to the World Team tryouts and ran in 2008 and everything, but I have not run long distance. I am nervous. I won't run long distance on my back ever since then. So, but I go out, I walk every day with my dogs. I will sometimes, sprint with them. Of course, I think sprinting or running when you feel it is very good. So if I'm feeling good, I'll run sometimes. But the thing that I do in addition to that, the thing that I've been posting my personal bests about is the strength training. And the strength training that I do, a lot of people do it. It's called high intensity training or super slow. And you typically go to a trainer. Some people are good enough, they feel good enough that they can do this at a gym on regular equipment. You do a circuit of exercises. And so for me, the exercises that we do are leg press, the chest press, which also gets your triceps. You do a neck machine, and there's 3 different, ways that you do it, front and back and sides and stuff. So a neck machine with weights as well. You don't try to get really strong in your neck. It's just more to, keep your neck in shape. Pull downs, for biceps. I don't think I should show you my biceps. They're scary. Again, metabolism. I'm one of these people who can build muscle pretty easily. Then also in addition to the pull down, there's an ab machine, which is just evil, and a back machine as well. Oh, and there's one other one. There's an ab machine that you hold these pads and you twist. It's really evil, really. So the ab machines are super evil. So there's 2 different ab machines, and then there's all of the other ones. And you go in there, you spend about half an hour, and you max out. You just max out weight that you can do with this. And so what we've been doing lately is only 3 reps on each machine about. So you do 3 reps, and then on the last one, it's like you push and you hold it for 10 seconds or something. But with each rep, you're pushing up or out or whatever, what they call contraction. You do that for 10 seconds and then really slow back. So it's 30 seconds going back into the original position before you push again. So imagine each rep is like 40 seconds or something if you're doing it right. It is wicked. It is really hard. And you build strength. I mean, every week you see the numbers go up. So on the leg press, we're going up just 2 pounds every week, but we just keep going up and up and making progress. So that's what I do. I do that once a week only. And it only takes about half hour, 35 minutes. And then I'm walking every day. And then otherwise it's diet. That is a really long answer. But I also gave you sort of history as an athlete and everything else. So that's one thing I'll add is that this whole thing of being, an athlete and self-identifying as an athlete, I think part of it was because my mother was really unhealthy. So I think a little bit of my push to be super healthy was in a reaction of my mother. My mother was an alcoholic. And so I saw her just sort of as the epitome of not taking care of herself. So I think that's part of my motivation there. But now, especially as we get older, to find an efficient way to stay in shape, I truly believe it's, doing some sort of, walking or something every day. You don't want to sit all the time like I do when I sit here. And then the other thing is doing some kind of strength training. The strength training does really help. So that's me. That's what I do. Go out and research it for yourself. Ask your doctor, all of the usual disclaimers. And hopefully that's enough of the question. Yeah, I just did another personal best. I just posted it yesterday, by the way. So 372 pounds on the leg press. And my prior personal best before I had been sick with all the surgery and everything else had been 352. So that was quite an accomplishment for me. Let's go over to other questions that I have. Let's see here. Okay. Another patron asks, how did you discover Ayn Rand? And so for me, I got really, really lucky because I had Ayn Rand assigned to me in high school as part of the first essay contest that was sponsored by the Ayn Rand Institute. And my high school English teacher, he was not an objectivist. He was just a really funny guy. He happened to also be the baseball coach. So he had this kind of gruff demeanor. Some people really hated him. I ended up really liking him. As I look back on it, I'm thinking maybe he didn't have the best way of motivating all of the people, but I certainly respected him. And he, I guess they sent to him, like they sent to so many other high school teachers at that time, the Ayn Rand Institute sent him, I guess, the literature on the contest. It was the first annual essay contest. And he decided to assign it to us as an assignment. So we had to read the novel and then write the essay. And I've told this story before, but oh my gosh, I wrote the worst essay. I wrote the worst. I mean, maybe not the worst, but it was bad. And there is no copy of it as far as I know out there. I know that I don't have any copy of it. I asked at the Institute, and apparently they don't have any of the copies from the early years from people who didn't win. And I certainly did not win. I wasn't anywhere near. I'm going to tell you the premise of my essay so you can see how bad it was. And keep in mind, here's my excuses as to why it was so bad. I don't know how badly written it was, but it was just bad in premise, and I'll tell you why. So I moved from, as I told you, Texas to California. This was at the end of my sophomore year of high school. So had only been in this place for a while, and I was kind of, a weird out loner, all the other people, they've been going to school forever. And my friends were the Duran Duran fans. Somehow I got there and I found the Duran Duran fans and we hung out. I had other friends too, but the ones that I really hung out with most of the time were these Duran Duran fans. It was an eclectic bunch of people. They all just happened to like Duran Duran. Weird basis. But yeah, so I'm not really in touch with fellow high school students. And I was always kind of a bit of a loner too. So I didn't know, I had no temperature for my fellow student. So I read The Fountainhead, and those of you who know the novel, there's Howard Roark and there's Peter Keating. And I can't remember what the premise of the question was in the essay contest, but typically it's something about individual versus collectivism in man's soul, and the being a first-hander versus a second-hander, or something along those lines. And here I am, however old I am, what am I, 17 or something, and completely out of touch with all of the other students. And when I read this book, when I read The Fountainhead, I immediately identified, with Roark. That's, you do if you're someone who is sort of brought up or kind of stumbled into that sort of thinking. So I did identify with Roark. And to me, it seemed obvious that anyone who read this book would side with Roark. So the stupid premise of my essay was, how could anybody who reads this book think anything else except for that Howard Roark is right? And, I thought I was so smart. So I write this essay and I turn it in. And as I said, it didn't go anywhere. It didn't do anything. It might have gotten a decent grade in the class because it was probably decently written. I actually I got a 5 on the English AP exam. Those of you who know American exams can know something about that. So as a writer, I guess I was decent by high school standards. As, a premise of an essay, the thesis, it was horrible. So we go, after we turn in the essays, only after we turn in the essays are we allowed to have a class discussion about this. That's when we have the class discussion. And it's during the class discussion that I find out, no, not everybody who reads this book identifies with Howard Roark. Some of them did not. And I also found out my mother, she denied it. She ended up denying it later, but my mother had been drinking this one night. And she, and yeah, I'm talking about my mother. My mother died in 95. Okay, so I'm talking about someone who's no longer around. But she did deny this, but I remember this. So she'd been drinking this one night. And I had asked her, because I love this book, The Fountainhead, and I asked her, hey, we're reading this book. She immediately launched into this thing, you cannot be a Howard Roark in this world and everything else. So that was my introduction. I remember also that, in the back of the books in those days, they had a little card, a postcard, and you could fill it out if you wanted to get more information. And I am sure that I filled out that card and hope to get information back. And I'm also pretty sure that when that information came back in the mail from the Ayn Rand Institute, that my mother just threw it out. I'm pretty sure about that. But years later, she ended up denying all that. Of course, years later, she saw me get involved in Objectivism, and she may have even seen me when I was working part-time for the Institute at some point, or knew that I was. I'd been involved in local clubs and stuff by then. So, so that's how I got involved in Objectivism. Now, when I went to college, there had been a period of time where I sort of was kind of dropping out of it, and I wasn't as enthusiastic about it. And then when I went to UCLA, they had a campus club table. And this is where I tell you, there's two programs that the Ayn Rand Institute has, which I think are just so valuable, and they were personally valuable to me. One was that essay contest, and the other was their campus club program. The essay contest was my first introduction. And then when I went back to college, there's a certain number of years there where you can sort of go astray. And as I said, my parents were alcoholic, and I just kind of was a little wild for a while. And then there was this campus club, and it was kind of a reminder of these ideas that I had identified with. And so I got involved, and I would go, to club meetings and stuff. But I remember when I was in college, I had a couple of friends, and these couple of friends, they said, don't get involved in the club. Don't get involved in Objectivism. It's a cult. You have to read the Brandon books. You better read the Brandon books to make sure, that you don't get involved because it's a cult. So I read the Brandon books, and I read those books from cover to cover. And my impression was the impression that a lot of people's was at the time. And if you read James Valiant's book, he's got, sort of the knockdown, lawyerly, drag out arguments against the Brandon books. But my impression, just as, a kid reading these books, was all the truly horrible things that they were saying about Rand. Like if you said, wow, that really was kind of bad, those things just somehow miraculously happened when the only witnesses were the Brandons or Ayn Rand. Of course, Ayn Rand was there, but also her husband, Frank O'Connor, who was already deceased at the time of the publication of those books. So you had to just take their word for it. Also, just sort of within the book itself, you got a sense that you didn't like or respect Brandons. I didn't like or respect either of the Brandons. And then, of course, there was the final point, which is whatever you think of how Ayn Rand conducted her personal life at that time. And there were some things, where you say, okay, would I have, an affair, even if you say, okay, well, I want to have an affair, but I want to go ahead and tell my spouse or partner, and you're okay with this, aren't you? And that's just a mess. There's just no way I would want to be involved in that kind of situation. So that would not be me. Nonetheless, first of all, I also think, of course, she made a big mistake having that affair with Nathaniel Brandon, given who he was, and there's all that too, right? But whatever mistake she made, it doesn't say anything about the philosophy. You could say, okay, did she have certain things in her psychology that made her? I'm not going to psychologize her either. I'm going to look at the philosophy and say, okay, do I think the philosophy is true and right? And then decide, do I want to live my life by that philosophy? And was my focus. So like I said, I read these books. Anything that was really horrific in the books, it was just, the witnesses were very limited at the time, and nobody who was alive or credible in my view. And like I said, the other thing is that you judge this based on the philosophy, not on the person. And most of her life, of course, she's just insanely productive and creative, and these wonderful novels that I've enjoyed and that have really, personally, like I said, helped me in my life, this philosophy. So that's how I got involved in Objectivism. Now the other question, maybe I'll answer just a couple more of these questions, and I'll save the remainder for later. The next one is, what led you to become a serious objectivist thinker? My first response to that is complex question, because it's assuming I'm a serious objectivist thinker. And I sometimes Okay, I'm a serious objectivist thinker, but not, would I say, an always scholarly thinker. How about that? So I think about the ideas and how to apply them all the time, and of course I'm trying to live this life, and this is the philosophy that I believe is correct, and so I'm doing this, right? And I think about it. I am um so I don't think I have any option, really. I mean, I was a serious thinker from age 12. It's the first I can remember, although my grandmother gave me a bit of a snippet from earlier than that, from say age 9. But the first topic that I remember seriously thinking about was religion, and in conjunction with that, the functioning of my mind. So around age 12 or so, I had all of these friends who were trying to get me involved in religious groups. It was the first time I was really seriously asked to consider religion. I wasn't brought up with any religion. I had, like I said, this yucky household, kind of neglected, really. So one of the good side effects of that is that you can figure out what you think about the world. But then, like I said, I had the peer pressure. These friends, they're in church groups, and they said, hey, come to our church group meeting. I even went to a church group retreat weekend because it sounded like fun to go away for the weekend and stay in cabins and all of that stuff. So I did some thinking at the time. And for me, I decided early on, I'm an atheist. The reason was that I didn't have any faith. I didn't see any evidence for this higher being. This concept of anything above, right? None of the above is the show I do with Huron. Anything of the above, I didn't have a sense of it. And when you go to a church group or a church retreat weekend and there's prayer sessions, everybody gathers around, and I guess they hold hands sometimes, whatever, I can't remember. But what I do remember is looking at all of my friends and the other people there and thinking, do I believe this like they do? I just don't believe this like they do. So, that was really for me, thinking first about religion was a big topic. And in conjunction with that, I thought about ethics, because I thought, even if I don't believe in God, it was important to be a good person. And I just had a very rudimentary idea of what that was at the time. Things like don't do drugs and be honest and don't steal and things like that. But I didn't have a very sophisticated understanding. But I was thinking, and I was also very interested in justice, that justice is very important. I remember Yaron talked about that the other day. The most important thing to him was justice. And justice was super important to me as well. I think there were some things that had happened and I didn't think they were unfair. And so, you get very riled up about justice when you're young. So that's, so what led me to become, in terms of serious objectivist thinker, applying the ideas to certain things, I guess in terms of really getting interested in pursuing ideas academically more, it was when I was in college. And I was getting into debates with fellow students in college. I remember having debates about capitalism and everything else. And at the time when I first went into college, I went in as an economics major. And I slowly shifted over to something called math applied science, where you applied math to physics and economics that kind of cobbled together a major that allowed me to do a lot of math, which had actually been my big strength when I was younger, was math. But yeah, so here I'm in economics classes. And I thought, oh, you go to economics class and you figure out how to defend capitalism. And I started to learn when I would get into these debates that you could debate at the level of economics all day long, but unless you got beneath that and you started debating at the level of ethics at least, then you would never get anywhere. Of course, I had no idea how to debate at the time either. So it was engaging in debates as well that got me to think, okay, I need to learn more about the ideas and more about how they relate to the issues that I care about, the issues that I'm having discussions about with other people. So there's one other question. And I was going to allot about an hour for this, so I've got one other question that I want to answer. Roger over here in the chat is saying that he was born in Waco and lived there until sophomore year in high school. same curious experience. Now, for me, I'm actually a native Californian, and I lived in Texas 2 different times, actually, but each time for a limited time. So the first time I lived there from about seventh grade probably. So I probably started there about seventh grade and then went up through the second year of sophomore, second year of high school, sophomore year, then moved out here again. So seventh, eighth, ninth, so 3.5 years-ish or so. And then I lived in Texas again. I got to teach at UT Austin for a year. That was really a nice thing to do and be able to spend time with Tara Smith there. And that was from 2003, 2004. So I'm not a native Texan. Kind of glad about that. Texas is hot and humid. I'm very spoiled with California weather here. So one more question. How did you meet Leonard Peikoff? That's the last one that I'll go ahead and answer. So, it's funny because when you read the Brandon books obviously don't paint a good picture of him. I think that they ended up sort of jealous of his, relationship, the mentorship relationship that he had with Ayn Rand, and, the fact that he, stayed on good terms with her and stuff like that. So I didn't know what I was going to think of him, given from the books. I didn't have any other impression. Of course, with Rand, I had another impression of her because I'd read hers and stuff. Anyway, so I go and I watch a talk that he gives. This is the first time that I've seen him. And he gave a talk called Healthcare is Not a Right in Orange County, California. I can't remember the year. I'm thinking it's 93, probably 93 or so. So I watched him give this talk, and he was so excellent and just so impassioned. I was really, really impressed. But then I didn't meet him until, I'm thinking, it was summer of 94. Summer of 94, I went to my first Objectivist conference, and I was sitting in the front row, and I can't remember who I was sitting next to. I was sitting next to somebody who was a longtime regular at the conferences, and it could have been a woman named Rose who's no longer with us. Anyway, she was an older lady who had been to a lot of conferences, and she was sort of, I think, taking me under her wing a little. It was my very first conference. And Leonard, he gets up on the stage and he's going to do his lecture. And at the time, he was trying to pitch doing a TV show. He wanted to do a TV show. And as part of that, he needed to put some sort of proposal together, and he needed some typing done. And so he puts, he goes to the audience, the whole audience who's amassed there, and says, I need somebody to do some typing for me. Who's available to do it? And I go ahead, raise my hand, but a ton of people raise their hand. But there's a woman who's next to me. Like I said, she's taking me sort of under her wing. She's a longtime attendee at the conference. And she yells at Leonard and says, over here, pick her. So, I had my hand up, he picked me. And I went and I did some typing for him. But it was so funny because I had to do the typing on this really old MS-DOS, computer at the hotel business center or whatever it was. He had arranged some time to use the hotel computer. And I only used, I think, Windows and stuff. I didn't use DOS and whatever it was so I had to go and study up on the software and make sure that I was okay, using it and everything, because I'm going to go do typing for Leonard Peikoff. I'm at my first conference, And so I go and I do the typing for him. And by the way, when I went to that first conference in 94, I'll have to dig out old pictures or something, but I had the ring in my nose at that first conference. So that was a big thing, right? So show up, my first Objectivist conference, I'm the only person with this nose ring, which I loved at the time too, and I love it now. But yeah, so I do all this typing for him. And then after that, at the end of the conference, he does a book signing and stuff. And so I went up, and I should actually do I have that copy of the book here? I've got the copy of the book that he signed then still. I had him sign my copy of Opar that I had all marked up and everything, and he signed it. But so that's how I met him. I ended up doing some work for him, which I think is probably the best way to meet somebody like that. And I, good typist, typed efficiently, all of that stuff. And so that was good. And, we ended up getting along pretty well. And of course, I had greatly admired him. Obvious age difference. So that was behind why the marriage was not the best idea. Although we got along, we did a lot of cool things together for quite a long time. We were together for over 12 years. So, they're just different stages of life and different goals in life and life paths. So, any other questions from people who are over here live? I feel like what I should do is try to check my Twitter or my Facebook and see if anybody's got questions that they submit over there. I'm getting notifications and stuff. Let me check it really quick. No, I don't see any. Okay, I'm going to go over to Twitter. See if I got any tweets of questions. John says, what is my primary goal in what I do? This is going to go back to, and this is something that I'd like to go actually find the show that I did on this, is recapitulate this. What do I think is the value, say, of talk radio or of any show like this? And there's a few things that I think this provides, this sort of show. Now, today I'm just talking about myself, questions that people ask me. This is all very indulgent stuff. But typically I am using a set of ideas to engage with current events and things about the culture. What is the value of a show like that to anybody? First of all, I think it can provide some sense of community, of course, for people who are all, fans of the show, who all share the same ideas. Of course, there's that. I think that any good show of this kind, where the host is thoughtful in engaging and figuring out what stories are important to discuss and doing a first take analysis of those stories in relation to a certain set of ideas, that what you're doing in effect is taking a first pass at analyzing history as it happens in effect. And so you're helping people make sense of the world. You are helping people, of course, reach and validate a certain set of ideas, because you see how they apply. You can see, how certain ideas in practice lead to certain consequences. Anybody who is pretty good and pretty much on the right track on a lot of the issues, it doesn't have to be somebody with the perfect philosophy, the perfect ideas. They can provide you an sort of a centralized look at what's happening, what end up being, sort of the most important events that are going to end up shaping this particular era. So there's that as well. Of course, there's some entertainment value. I would, of course, sometimes like to provide some entertainment value for people as well. But it's really just demonstrating how ideas apply to certain concretes, and trying to model decent thinking about those concretes as well. And just sort of, if there's anybody else who's out there trying to struggle to make sense of what's going on in the world and the politics and stuff, I'm giving you my take on it, and I'm hoping that people find it helpful. Definitely want to provide entertainment, sometimes commiserate with people as well, and hope to put together a sense of community who also come at these things in the same way. Everybody's also got a different sense of life. So you'll find that certain hosts, whatever their personal style of coming at the world at, is going to appeal to you versus other people as well. And so I do think that there's a potential to create a community of like-minded people. All the people who think none of the above is a good and fun title for a show, or who share love of certain types of music with me along with the ideas and stuff. Maybe that's the type of person who this show is going to appeal to more. The other thing I would like to do, though, of course, if I can, is challenge people who disagree with me. And one of the primary things that I would like to model when I'm engaging, for example, I've still got my Jordan Peterson book sitting here on my desk, right? One thing I want to model when I'm engaging with other thinkers, and whether it be somebody who asks me a question, in a chat, or when they call up during my blog talk show or anything else, is a polite and engaging disagreement, and try to actually get at the root of what's causing a disagreement with people about fundamental ideas. Yes, I would like to convince people of my views being right, or spread the right ideas and all of those things. But you can't really have, the idea of like, oh, I'm going to convert people as a primary goal. The primary goal really, I think the thing that's most urgent in our country today is to have polite disagreement and intelligent discussion about ideas that actually matter. That's the thing that has been eroded recently when you've got, for instance, violence on campus to shut speakers down. You've got Antifa trying to shut people, speech down all over the place. And you have on both sides, I've gotten from both liberals and conservatives, depending on what issue I'm talking about, say on Twitter, really, really rude vitriol from people and stuff too. So that's the kind of thing that I would like to counter by modeling polite disagreement, and polite disagreement even among also objectivists, people who share my philosophy. One of the things that will probably come out with Yaron as we have our discussions, as we continue our discussions, is that we'll disagree on certain things. But I think if he and I disagree on certain things, we're going to do it in a way that is not the flame war that you see online. So, people say thank you. I'm trying definitely to do this. And, I'm like everybody else. I think in general, I'm what Peterson would call agreeable. I can definitely see myself as a more agreeable type. I see Yaron as a fairly agreeable type. And nonetheless, sometimes I reach my limit. So when, for example, I've had these times I'm fortunate enough to be retweeted by Ben Shapiro. And when he retweets something that's really controversial, I will sometimes get the nastiest tweets coming at me. And what I always try to do is come in and, so why do you say that? And, have some people you don't engage at all, and I think I have a good sense of who's worth engaging. But if they're somewhat edgy, hostile, but I see an opening where I can try to engage them politely, then I'll try a few rounds. And I'll do this with different ones and stuff. And I'll do it as much as I can. And then at a certain point, I sense that the next one that comes in that's hostile, I just have no more patience and I just need to stop. So I reach my limit too. But I think in general, I really try to do that. And why, again, because people talk about it from the terms of free speech. Obviously, the right to free speech is so important, but a culture, I have these couple different shows. I did a little, like one show, and then I did a reprise later, something called Culture of Censorship, that we've reached a culture of censorship in our country where people think it's good and valid to shut other people's ideas down. And that's the sort of thing that I want to counter. Just the other day, I published an article that I want to try to talk about with Yaron tomorrow, which is from the New York Times. And the article is along the lines of what people call this toxic masculinity stuff. And yeah, you can dismiss that. But the substance of the, is toxic masculinity the cause of school shootings, or is the either toxic masculinity, I guess, on the one hand, or the answer to toxic masculinity, is that the lack of answer to toxic masculinity, is that the cause of school shootings? Whatever it is, right? No, I don't think that it's the cause of school shootings, but did the guy, have a point? Maybe he did, but it's just interesting when you put something out there to think about, and I quote, when I put an article out there, I try to quote some interesting essence of the article that's just worth thinking about or discussing. So I put this out there on Facebook, and I get some really just, reactionary comments right back really fast. It's like, okay, well, why not just, let's think about this a little bit and let's engage it sort of thoughtfully and not just immediately react and say, oh, that's ridiculous. So that's what I try to do. I try to model it. John says, thanks for what it's worth. You always come across as polite regardless of the other person's view. Well, I thank you. Sometimes, I still come across as polite, but I will politely tell the person, sorry, this is beyond the pale. I'm going to unfriend you. And I'll give you an example of when I just say, this is too much. I'll unfriend or mute or do whatever I can do on a different format. If I put out, and this happens on Facebook as example I'll give you. If I put something on Facebook where clearly I am sharing an emotion that I have about a strong value of mine. So for example, there were these stories about how they're going to bring Snowden back to the US and execute him, right? If I express dismay about this, right, it makes me upset that this is potentially going to happen to Edward Snowden, whom I think is misguided as he is in some ways. I think he's heroic. I've had a whole show defending that. This is my thought, right? I'm really dismayed this is going to happen. I put this out here on Facebook. So people come in and they just start bashing Edward Snowden. Now, don't you have some sort of sense, and these are people who, friends of mine on Facebook, don't you have a sense that if somebody expresses a strong emotion of dismay about danger to something that they obviously value, that is not the time to come in and have like the big debate about how Edward Snowden is the worst person in the history of the world or whatever it is that you think? No. So when the person does that, then I'll come in and I'll say, hey, by the way, and this is my value. And if they come in again and again, then I say, I'm sorry, you're not polite. I'm done with you. So I have my limits. I do have my limits, but I try, like I said, I try to do that. So as I said, primary goal, model thoughtful engagement with the events and the culture of the world using this set of ideas that I believe is correct. And in doing that, like I said, there's different things that come out of it. One of them is hopefully spreading those ideas, but it's just modeling that sort of behavior, providing this, like I said, a sense of community. All the patrons that are going to join over at Patreon, by the way, thank you everybody. I think that that's going to be an interesting and fun community to see how that fleshes out, whoever ends up being drawn in by the value that I'm providing out there. Hopefully entertaining, hopefully also cathartic sometimes, because things just suck in the world sometimes. And then we're going to come in here and talk about how they suck. So there's a number of different values that can come out of that, but I just try to come at the world as in a straightforward and thoughtful way as I can, using this set of ideas, and try to bring some creativity and some entertainment value as well. That's a very long answer to that question. And what I probably need to do is come up with a mission statement that's a lot shorter, right? That would be one of my goals now that I'm doing this. I'm actually setting up the Patreon page and making this effort to make this a real thing. So anyway, I'm long-winded. It's been a long session. I've intended an hour. It's almost an hour and 10 now. Thank you everyone for sticking here, those of you who joined me in the session. And I guess I'm going to go ahead and stop the session and stop recording. Take care, everyone.